friends. Before we get started, I wanted to give you an update of some things that are coming up here in the next month. If you would like to join us or follow along, we will be at South by Southwest. This is the first think tank pop-up of 2025, and we will be partnering with Rendeavor, Lorenzo's House, which supports the family and the children of young onset dementia darling. If you're not following her on Instagram, it's a must. She is also my co-host for the other podcast that we have, Gather Darlings. And then, of course, my partner and my friend, James Lee, who owns Bella Groves, a dementia education community, and also is the founder of Think Tank. So we are bringing a conversation around dementia, age tech, aging in these mainstream arenas, and we're really excited to do that. We're going to bring awareness, raise fundraising support for our friends at Lorenzo's House, and just shine a light on bringing professionals and aging services together in this South by Southwest community. So we can't wait for that. I will keep sharing each episode, kind of what's happening, what's going on, and giving you an idea of just different things that we're excited about. We're so excited to just be having these important conversations. So I wanted to share, I was thinking about how when we were caring for my grandma towards the end of her progression with dementia, she was struggling to find things that would bring her comfort and joy towards those later stages of her life. And the things that she really once loved just didn't resonate as much anymore. She loved seeing her grandkids. She loved watching Wheel of Fortune. She loved getting ready, doing her makeup. But it just really had me thinking about how I wish that our family had access to Zinnia TV at that time. It wasn't around, and now it is for all of you. Zinnia creates content specifically designed for people living with dementia, offering videos that spark those memories, help with that restlessness, have moments of connection, spend time together. You can watch a beautiful sunrise or, listen to music and look at all of those things that your loved one has loved and be able to watch and view that together. Those simple moments. So if you're a caregiver or a healthcare professional, Zinnia can be the difference between a tough day and a day filled with peace and connection. They are helping families like ours, and they can help you too. Visit zinniatv.com. I invite you to use the code GATHER20 for 20% off an annual subscription. And this is for families, for healthcare communities. There are special things in place for you, and we invite you to look into that. The links will be in our episode description. But now I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. It is about those hardest moments in our life that wake us up the most. Loss, caregiving, midlife, unraveling are not just things we have to go through, but Katie shares about it's really an invitation to live more fully. My guest is Katie Prentiss, an actress, filmmaker, and storyteller who found herself at a crossroads after losing her mom to frontotemporal dementia. This loss sent her into a deep evaluation of life, leading her to embrace risk and creativity and the aliveness that comes from facing the hard stuff head on. And her journey is one that many of us will recognize: caring for someone we love, navigating grief, wrestling with the unknown. Her upcoming film, Wake Up Maggie, is a love letter to caregivers, midlife transformations, and those moments that shake us awake. Cannot wait for this conversation. It is a look at what it means to let go, rebuild, and embrace the messiness of our life. Here is my interview with Katie Prentiss. Hi, Katie. We finally meet. Thank you for being here.
I'm so glad to be with you today. Thank you for
Oh,
having me.
oh, my pleasure. I'm so looking forward to just hearing your story and your insight. You cover so many different things in your
Mm.
life and in your work from caregiving, motherhood, loss, reinvention. Can you tell us more about what led you to this work, more about your story?
Yeah, to say it simply, I always go to a quote from Brene Brown because she talks about midlife is not a crisis, but it's more of an unraveling. When I heard that, I connected with that idea so deeply because I feel like midlife often has us encounter like a deeper evaluation of our life. Um, but also, it tends to introduce trauma and crisis or grief. Like a lot of us start encountering loss in a different way. And for me, that was true in losing my mom to frontotemporal dementia. And having that experience with her unraveled me in a way that helped me just evaluate my life and move into, I feel like it's almost like peeling the layers back of an onion and it's like getting me to my raw true version of who I am. But it also allowed me to think about like what do I really want to do with my life, and just looking at things of like I want to feel more alive, like when I'm in my daily day-to-day moments with people, I want to feel present. I want to feel more alive. So, learning to take more risks and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just this journey of a midlife unraveling that has led me to where I am today.
Oh, I identify with that.
Yes.
Being in midlife and all. Oh, I love
Mm-hmm.
Brene Brown too. I
Yeah.
remember her sharing a video, and I'm trying to remember in the exact context, but it was almost like to the effect of, midlife kind of like taps us on the shoulder and it's like, wake up.
Yes.
Wake up. All that you've been
Yes.
doing doesn't serve you anymore. And it's that time when, yeah, that rediscovery happens. And I wish I'm
Hmm.
going to go back. I have to find it. But it was so, I remember watching that going, oh my word, she is talking to me.
Yes. That's what it is. It's an opportunity to wake up and
Hmm.
to move into something deeper or, yeah, or more
Yeah.
alive. Yeah.
Yeah. I know. I think she talked about like, you're halfway to dead. Like no messing
Oof.
around anymore.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
more. Oh, yeah, it's so good. And there's moments and parts of our lives that bring us to that place. And for you,
Mm.
would you say that the beginning of that was your mom's FTD diagnosis? Was that the time when you were like, okay, this is life is happening. I'm in this and my life is changing in a lot of different ways.
Mm. I would say for me, that was almost just like crisis management. Like when we got that diagnosis and then the years following of her care, that was shared between my siblings, but her final years were spent with us here in Oregon where we live. For me, I feel like that was more of a fog, like trying to go through all of those years. But the wake up call or the unraveling was happened for me more in the processing her loss, my loss and her dying, and then the grief and just starting to think about like, yeah, how do I want to live now that I've gone through this process of losing someone so close to me. Yeah. I think that it's more been in that, like feeling that grief, but then also like, how do I want this to impact my life?
Yeah, grief is, oh, it
Mm,
changes us. It changes
yes.
us. It teaches us about ourselves and the relationships and the life that we want to have.
Mm,
For you, did you find that in your caregiving, and I know you said it was like crisis management and you shared that with your siblings, did you start processing some of that grief prior to her loss? And how did caregiving reshape your perspective on things? What was that like?
yeah. Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I think that it's interesting for me because I was thinking about this before we hopped on our call. When I experience caregiving next, because it will just be a part of our lives whenever it comes. It doesn't ask permission on timing. When I become a caregiver again, I think I'll be more equipped to do it better. When I became a caregiver for my mom, my kids were all a lot younger. I mean, we lost her 8 years ago, and then her diagnosis to death was 6 years.
Mhm.
So it was a while back. Our kids were a lot younger. I did not have the expectation of caregiving for a parent at
Mhm.
that phase in my life. I think it's different when our parents are like 70s and 80s and you start seeing like the aging process affect them differently. Um, so I felt like I was catapulted into caregiving, almost like someone had an accident and you have to then become the caregiver. Caregiving shaped me in the sense of, again, I feel like I have more perspective on this now that I've been able to reflect, but caregiving shaped me in a similar way to having children. So anyone who's experienced like having children, it's like for me, my experience of that was that my life, my personal life, ambition, goals, desires slowed during that season because the priority became my children and their needs being met. Especially, I'm talking about the babies and the toddlers and all of those years where you're just physically caring for them so much. I think caregiving for my mom felt similar to that, like creating a pause and a slowing down of my life. Like it's a sacrificial love, right? It's like losing things that we want to support somebody else. The difference is that caregiving for children involves pain and tears for sure, but a lot of joy and laughter and like fantasizing about the future. Caregiving for my mom toward her death involved so much grief
Mhm.
and pain and suffering and loss. So, sacrificial love connected to that suffering and crisis and trauma is such a difficult journey. But it taught me that my life can contract
Mhm.
and it's okay to be in that contraction and it doesn't exist forever. There will be an expansion after. And I
Mhm.
think learning that and visualizing the contraction before the expansion and even when we're in an expansion knowing that there might be a contraction again because that's the rhythm that the world exists on and that we exist on and as humans, it like whew, it settles me and calms me like, oh, okay, I can go through this season and this chapter, even if it's years, because it won't be forever.
I have not heard it explained like that, but
Mm,
that is such a beautiful representation of that time. And then the hope
yeah.
of that, yeah. When you were talking about children, one conversation I've had before about, when we caregive for our children, we know that that time is also finite, and we
Yeah.
have the
Mhm.
expectation of we know what to expect because of the timeline, right? Okay, kindergarten.
Totally.
And then we know this milestone
Totally.
when they're 16 and then 18. And so we understand the progression, right? Obviously, everyone has, their story within that, but there is
Yeah.
natural progression and it's the contrast of that when we're caring for someone that's older, we don't know, right?
Yeah.
It's just so unknown and that can be
Ugh.
unsettling because we want to know,
Yes. That
so
is such a good point. Just such a good point. And I think that it's like that was such a fear with mom is like, how long is this gonna last? Because this is horrible.
right,
Like, I
right.
mean, there's joy in knowing that you can be next to your person that you love so much, but it's horrible watching someone's decline. I think the connective tissue to those two things is the challenge of staying present
Mm,
because with parenting, every phase, it's like, how can I be present in this moment, not wish it away because it's like the chaos or whatever, and not like, constantly like elevate the past as if it's the best thing ever. You know how
mhm.
moms are always like, "Oh, enjoy it. It doesn't last long." And you're just like, "I cannot hear that right now." Like,
Isn't it?
yeah.
Yeah.
Don't say that to me right now. It goes too fast. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't want to hear that. But I think, similarly with walking my mom through the end of her life, it was like if I dwell on the past, it brings up so much grief. If I dwell on the future, it brings up so much fear.
Right,
So
right.
how do I just live and breathe in this moment and
Yeah,
feel her skin next to me and like hug her?
right.
That's the challenge.
It is. It is. And you talk about that where you said that her passing also left you this precious gift of, right, living fully and
Mm,
um the what ifs, right? And
yeah.
looking at that, but also how has that played out for you now, right? Like how has it shaped your work as a filmmaker, as an advocate, and yeah, getting through that.
I mean, I think that when we've been close to death, whether I have, friends who have lost their spouses, and for me, it's like losing my mom, I think it just gives you a different perspective on life. You realize, you know, YOLO means a lot more to you than just a cute catchphrase. You just realize that there's no guarantees whether, you know, that idea of we could die tomorrow. I think that gives me I think most people who have processed grief like this, I love I it's this weird like it's a complicated feeling because you think I love people who have experienced grief because they tend to be really soft and warm and empathetic, and all these beautiful qualities come from it.
Mhm.
But I also hate that they've processed anything so deeply and so painful. I think that grief can also give us this perspective on risk that, like, oh, so I'm gonna, sometimes I think, oh, I'm making a feature film. This is like the biggest deal in the whole wide world. This is so hard. And my mind runs with that and thinks like it elevates it to be like the scariest thing ever, like whatever. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, whatever. It's just a movie. It's like life is short. Like, you think about the trajectory of the whole wide world and how many people are in it, and like how it really is one tiny little marble in the universe that people talk about. So I think that the grief and death also gives us that perspective, like the things that we want to make such a big deal or to like be afraid of. What is a risk,
Yeah.
when it really comes down to is like, oh, I'm
Mhm.
a risk taker, but what is the risk here? Like, what? It's not when you
Oh,
think about it.
yeah, the perspective of that. It
Hmm.
is. And you also share about, or you touched on that, right? Fear, the uncertainty.
Yeah.
And for you, it's been the place of possibly developing FTD yourself,
Yeah.
having to
Yeah.
look at that, right? That reflection of that. How do
Yeah.
you navigate that? Like, what advice do you have for others that
Mm.
have a loved one in there that is their concern? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That has been a journey. I think I lost mom and I made my first short film loosely based on like those early signs of someone having dementia. Um, and doing that work helped me to encounter my fear in a close way. Really my grief in a close way of I'm circling on these stories that are very true and lived for me in writing this. Um, then as time progressed, I was learning more about frontotemporal dementia along the way too, like connecting with other people in this community, other caregivers and whatnot. And I started hearing like, oh, there can be a genetic component. And I'm like, oh, that I don't want to hear that. Don't
I
want to hear
don't.
that at all.
Mhm.
And you know, denial is so adorable, right? So I was living in denial, like, oh, but that's not my mom. Like, we don't have the genetic gene. Then her younger brother was diagnosed with FTD. He's living with FTD right now. And that news was a huge pill to swallow. I would like to explore getting tested in the future and whatnot, but I think his diagnosis just made me get even closer to the reality that we could have a genetic component in our family. Um, that brings up a lot. So now here I am working on this feature film, once again, like moving in closer to my grief, but
Mhm.
also my fear. I was finding myself, and I still do this sometime in my day to day, but it's like you have a slip of a word or like a jumbled thought or whatever thing we witnessed in the person we love like exhibits in our life, and that fear just feels like so visceral, like a lurking creature over my shoulder, that I would find myself like, no, 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 having this like, and it's all this like subconscious too. It's like this like panic response. And so then I'm like, okay, what is happening? Like I keep looking over my shoulder, feeling this, my nervous system get activated. So for me, it was like, it's a moment, but it's also a practice of stopping and saying, okay, what is that? What is that fear? What are you going to do with that? Let's face it. So I turn and look at it. I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, so what if you're true? Like, one thing that helps me is say like, what if that's real? Like, what if I 100% knew I had the gene and I had FTD in my future? Um, what would I do with my life?
Right.
And And it's like that acceptance of like, I can't control this. So how do I accept it? And my acceptance question leads me to, oh, well, the coolest thing ever is I would make this movie that I'm working on. I would try to live in a healthy way. I would spend time with my family. I'd try to be present. These are all things I want anyway. So when I realized that, I'm like, oh, I'm okay. So I would keep living my life in the way I'm living, but it also was such a gift to face it in that way and ask that question, because then I knew this movie that I'm working on is not just a really cool project, not just really fulfilling work,
Mhm.
not just like, um, you know, a fun ambition or like whatever in my life, but it becomes this mission for me. And
Mhm.
it's like, this is no matter what, before I die, I will make this movie. Like, no matter what else happens in my life, this will happen. And I
Mhm.
will contribute to this conversation. I will contribute to this cause. I hope my biggest hope for this movie is that it will bring hope and healing to so many people who know what it feels like to caregive, to go through midlife, to encounter something like FTD. So, I would say, just to add one more thing about fears, is it still comes up for me, and this is how it's a practice. Is like, I was struggling with it once again just yesterday or this week. It's like, I for whatever reason, it was feeling really present in my life, and I started thinking about like, it's like I will fear it as if I'm going to decline tomorrow, you
Mhm.
know? Like I'll be like, "Oh, it's all over." And and then I'm like, "That's so ridiculous." I have to like actually spend time with the rational thought. It's like the fear thought is that my whole life is going to be stripped away from me tomorrow or something. It gives me
Mhm.
panic, like nervous system activated. Then I think, okay, like again, once again, even if I had it, it's probably not gonna really, like, decline my life for years from now,
Yeah.
you know? So, anyway, it just helps me, like, speaking truth to myself in that in those moments is just like, "Okay, calm down, stay
Yeah.
present."
Yes.
So,
Oh, the practice of that. I know.
mhm.
To do that, we do. Okay, tell us about the film. I want to
Ah,
hear all about it. I know you talk about it being a love letter to your mom. How did
mm,
you have the idea? Let us know where you're at in the process. And yeah, I just am excited to hear all about it.
thank you. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. My movie is called Wake Up Maggie. Maggie was the name my mom took in her midlife transformation, which is so cute. Like she had a name change in her probably like late 40s, early 50s, I'm guessing. I
Okay.
can't remember.
What was it before?
Her name is Margaret Catherine Branson, and
Okay.
she was called Peg or Peggy her whole life.
Yeah.
Um, and she never loved it. I think
Mm,
because like kids change
mm,
Peggy to Piggy or whatever. You know how we all have these like childhood experiences.
yeah.
So she never loved her name. After my parents divorced, she changed her name to Maggie. And she's
Mm,
like, I love that name. It's so
that's
cute. And I'm like,
good.
all right. So my movie is called Wake Up Maggie. It is, I call it a coming of middle age film. We
Mm,
have so many beautiful coming of age films, and I love that genre. But I'm super excited about creating a film about coming of middle age. And I think, especially women, we go through this whole big life change in midlife through perimenopause and whatnot. And
mm,
like that is real, like what we experience and process, and the transformations I see in my peers female, like it's phenomenal. Watching women come into their own and take up space is one of my favorite things. So, anyways, Wake Up Maggie is a coming of middle age film. It is a love letter to caregivers because Maggie goes on her own caregiving journey from, I'll say this, Maggie is able to tightly control her life until she gets a wake up call from her estranged younger sister. When she decides to go help her sister out, she realizes there's a lot more going on in Jane's life than what surfaced initially. So Maggie goes from being able to tightly control her life to being unraveled through caregiving. And we're going to encounter all of that with her. The beauty of making a film and the beauty of acting is we get to explore feelings and thoughts that we normally probably wouldn't want to talk about in an everyday conversation. Most of us try to be more gentle in our conversations and perhaps save face on who we really are when the rubber meets the road, you know? So I love I love the idea of telling, for me, Wake Up Maggie is it's a fictional story about two sisters, but is based on so much truth of my story. Like I say it's based on true stories because everything in it is real.
it is. Okay, so the themes, if we're going to be I'm going to say when we
Yeah.
watch the film,
Yes.
what are some of those themes that come out? I know midlife,
Hmm.
caregiving, uh, is it FTD? Is that the dementia that you explore in the film? What else?
Yes. Yeah. So, yes, I mean I don't want to give too much away in the plot, but the younger sister gets a diagnosis. Um this film will raise FTD specifically. We will highlight the fact that FTD is really challenging to get an accurate diagnosis. We'll highlight the youthfulness that FTD can often be found in. FTD is the most common type of dementia under the age of 65. Um, so, so we're going to highlight some of those things, but the film is through the perspective of Maggie, the caregiver, Maggie in midlife. So I think anyone who I this movie really is for anyone who is curious about that midlife journey, anyone who has experienced or will experience caregiving.
All of them.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's like we all think, "Oh, I don't know that." Well, you will. You will in some form or fashion.
Mhm.
Um, and then, yeah, to highlight FTD awareness as well. So it's going to be beautiful. It's clearly a drama, but there's a lot of comedy in it too. Those moments that just, I always say, like, we have to laugh, or to me, there's no, like, why would we keep going on? Like, we have to be able to laugh in the midst of our grief.
Yeah, completely. And what I love about film and through story, right? We connect with others, but it also highlights that bigger conversation, which is midlife, caregiving, creating awareness, do you feel, or what's your hope to influence some of those bigger discussions, whether it's with like research, you talked about early diagnosis,
Yeah.
the public's understanding.
Yeah.
What are your hopes for that?
Yeah, I would say like my number one goal is it's just when I say like love letter to caregivers, I'm like it is hope and healing for all of us who have processed a lot of this. That we can like take a minute, watch a movie and feel seen and less alone. That's huge for me. Um I love how movies can speak to change in ways that policy and research and organizations, nonprofits, like all these things are beautiful and so necessary. But movies have a way of getting in the back door and into the living room conversations, private homes. You can watch a movie for an actor or for the story or whatever and not have any idea that it's related to something like FTD. And my hope is that it will broaden the path for people to understand. Part of the struggle with getting a accurate diagnosis with FTD or even getting more research on FTD is so many people don't know about it until sometimes even after their loved one has died. They're like, "Oh, I think maybe they had that." It's it's less recognizable because it often is younger and it often is initiated by signs that aren't related to memory loss. So it's just behavioral changes and like all these personality things that happen that confuse people. So watching this on this movie, I hope will raise questions, increase awareness, like on a societal level. When we see someone on the street, maybe we'll go, "Oh, I wonder if there's like mental health issues," instead of just writing someone off and being dismissive. Then I definitely hope that the movie could be used to increase research to change policies like that, especially in our country, are that we would be more supportive of caregivers, of people with degenerative diseases, that they wouldn't have to go bankrupt because they're struggling with it's so corrupt to me that like that's I read someone say like FTD is so expensive and I'm like that is just wrong. Yeah. So I hope that this movie will bring I mean, it's a very big ambition when I say all of those things, but I just think a movie has a way of encouraging those conversations. And we can use it to spin into all of those things.
Oh, completely. And it gives people a voice. Like you said, we can internalize it in those moments. It opens up conversation,
Yes.
can ask the questions. It gives us a glimpse into experiences. So, so important. For those of us that are like, I've got these dreams. How do I do that? How do I get through to the
Mhm.
other side? What advice would you give them?
I think recognizing that the phase that we're in is a phase that we're in, it is a season. I find a lot of hope going for walks and watching nature change around me because it's so symbolic and so demonstrative of death and life happening. If you just if take the trees alone and the trees, shed everything and become so bare and um like I don't know if small is the right word, but it's just branches existing without any leaves, without any blooms. And then eventually we start seeing those little buds appear and the leaves sprouting and fruit or flowers or whatever comes from that. And there's so much beauty in that. And if we can just remember that our lives also operate in seasons, it's like the contraction and expansion that I was saying before. I hope my journey in my experience, it's easy to look at somebody's life and think, oh, wow, she gets to do like this movie and like there's so much freedom. But that wouldn't have happened if I didn't also have those contractions of years where I didn't do anything like this. So I hope it doesn't give people like, the comparison feeling of like I don't have that, but I hope my life gives people a hope of what could come later. Um, to be in those moments, let those moments soften you, change you, unravel you, knowing that what's down in the core will have time to shine too,
Yeah.
and you will be able to expand after.
And I've seen so much, like I know for me personally, my biggest moments of creativity have come after the hardest things that I've been through, right? The
Yeah,
creation of, oh, I've been through so much, but I have to have this avenue to like get some of that out. I don't know
right.
the right word, but yeah, yeah.
And I don't think you can have that if you don't do the work in those hard moments. If we live in denial or like avoid, I don't know. I think creativity does happen from a softening
Mm.
in our lives.
Yeah, it does. If your mom could see all that you have created and the ways that you've honored her story and your relationship, what do you think she would say to you?
I love this question because I often imagine what she would do if she was standing in the wings. And I always see her like, clapping and like just getting so excited and also surprised. I remember when I was making my first film, imagining what would it be like if I had told her, Mom, I'm making a movie and it's kind of about you. She would be like, oh, what? You know, she was a very like humble, like person who didn't need like the limelight at all. And so I just think like she would be so giddy and proud of me. And that visual, that imagination definitely fuels me and keeps me going. It's so sweet and happy for me to think about that.
I can imagine, right?
Hmm.
Like witnessing that.
Yes.
We want to support you. And for everyone listening, how can we support the film Wake Up Maggie, your advocacy, your support of caregivers? Let us know how we can do that.
Thank you so much. I love that. This movie has truly like has just such a growing energy behind it, which has been humbling and inspiring and just so encouraging to me. Um, I always say people can support us in three different ways, and I feel like they all come from the same bucket: time, money, and energy.
Right.
Time, money, and energy are all the resources that we have to give, um, and any of those things to me come from the same part of like who we are. It's like we want to connect to what we're doing with Wake Up Maggie. So time and energy is like you can follow us on social media at Wake Up Maggie Movie, um, or our website, wakeupmaggiemovie.com. You can sign up for our email list. There are ways like if you can just amplify our voice and our efforts. I think the social media is just it's often like it's just awareness raising, right? So like the more people that know that we're making this movie, the more people will come to the theaters and watch it and fill those seats, which is so important for the success of a movie. Having a viable audience before we even finish is so encouraging. So, time and energy, giving words of support and encouragement, and all of that is so wonderful. Money is it obviously, it takes a lot of money to make a movie. We are a true indie production, which means we are like grassroots effort trying to make this work without any like Hollywood production company supporting us. So, the money we've raised, we're under a fiscal sponsorship, which we're very proud of. Went through a big application process, and if anyone wants to give through the fiscal sponsorship, their donation is tax deductible because of that, which has been phenomenal for people who need a tax write-off or can do maybe have a corporate match available to them. Um, that has been something that has meant a lot to us because this movie is so cause-based. It feels really good. You're not just giving to make a movie, you're giving to raise awareness and to help this cause. So, we also have a GoFundMe if someone doesn't need the tax break, which a lot of people don't. But anyway, so yeah, time, money, and energy is all like a beautiful way to support us, and we appreciate any of it.
So good. Well, yes, everyone go support. I'll be sharing those links on our
Thank you.
description and following along, sharing when it all is ready to go and leading up to that. So thank you for the work that you're doing and sharing your story. I know so many people connect to that and want to be a part of it. So we appreciate you doing that for all of us, right? Bringing that
Yeah.
to space. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, and I truly hope it means a lot to everyone.
Are you looking for more support and community? We sure are. That is why I'm so happy to highlight one of my favorite podcasts in the caregiving community, Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver, hosted by my friends and sisters Natalie Elliott Handy and JJ Elliott Hill. They offer a unique blend of personal storytelling, expert advice, and candid conversations that shed light on the real-life challenges and triumphs that caregivers face. Tune in to Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver wherever you enjoy your podcasts, or explore more on their website at www.confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.